This morning's fireside chat with Naked. This morning's fireside chat with Nathan Jacobs. Hot off 8:54, his first Kona performance. I'm sure he's been speaking about it to death to everyone that cares around him. We are going to talk a little bit about his fueling and hydration tweaks we did. He is coached by a lovely coach in Belgium, in Antwerp, clearly doing some wonders there. And Nathan is a regular sub-9 hour age group triathlete. He's not a professional athlete. He holds down a full-time job, and he now has a newborn, Oliver, who is, remind me, is about
14 months.
Oh, yeah, 9. I thought,
yeah, a bit more than a year.
14 months. Yes, he arrived, early.
Which makes it sometimes a bit more challenging, indeed, Andy, as you might know.
Yes, yeah. No, I covered a little bit about chats about that, and some previous videos, and actually, now that you've got a newborn, I've got a 4.5-year-old, it's a different setup. So, all right, so you did a 103 swim, a 434 on the highway on good conditions, probably rode within yourself, and then you've backed up with a solid 307, which most people will struggle to get anywhere near their potential. You've regularly run, I believe, sub 3 off the bike, so that's in other Ironmans. What was your normalized power on the bike? Do you remember that? I'm sure you're quite a data.
260-ish.
260-ish, yeah. I would put you between 260, 270. I think we spoke about this when you were on our camp, that you need to be around 270 watts for your Ironman. First time at Kona, how did you find? So good things, bad things. We want to hear not just the nice fluffy swimming with the dolphins.
Yeah, it's a magic place, Andy. I mean, it's my seventh or eighth full distance. So I've done quite some, and I think Ironman in general is always magic. They add that magical American flavor on top. But honestly, the island, the setting, the athletes, the fact that you also only see like good athletes, you need to qualify to be there. So it all adds up to the magical flavor of what Ironman Kona is. I was there 8 days in advance, which also really helped me to get used to the humidity, to the heat. Did some 2-3 proper trainings still prior to the race, which really helped me to accommodate to that humidity. And I just tried to, as everyone else, just absorb the magical flavor over there. Yeah. And I think because you were saying offered to record this video, but in all honesty, Andy, it was initially me who reached out to you to actually have a look at my fueling strategy, because I was quite confident on the carb intake since it's my 7th full distance. But especially because of the humidity and the heat, I was sort of not super confident about the sodium intake. And knowing you and your specialty in sodium, I reached out and I really appreciate the discussion that we had. What was it, 2-3 weeks prior to the race, which also really helped me to adjust that fueling strategy. So also, thanks for that.
Thank you. Just a straight fact. It's nice just to hear in the first few minutes, like, okay, everyone has a slightly different carb amount they try nail. So what was your target and your actual give or take for your carbs? And then we'll dive into the tweaks you did around hydration, because if anyone's watched a couple of my other videos, we like to separate generally fuel and hydration, and your liquids seems to work well in the heat.
Yeah, sure. So the target for carbs was 115. So in total, since the indication was 4 hours 30 for the bike split, that was a 530 carbs. So for just the bike, and eventually that resulted in the race even a bit higher. That was 118, 120 carbs per hour. So since I took some additional gels at the 8 stations, and in all honesty, I could have even gone a bit higher, because I felt, especially the last 10-15K on the bike, that slight hunger feeling, which you would like to avoid at all times. So also very happy that I had a bottle of 90 carbs still in T2 to really get the necessary carbs in at the start of the marathon. Yeah.
Well, you did get your fuel requirements mainly from liquid carbs, because I often get some of my athletes doing probably the slower athletes, 10 hours to 12 hours athletes, more solids in the front end of the bike. You are someone that operates really well on liquid carbs and can push these high boundaries above 90, which we'll touch on. So am I right to say that you majority got those carbs from
Liquids,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, mainly liquids. I use never second, since it also for the carbs, for the carb intake, because it combines both sodium and especially very high carb intake. So liquids and gels for precision hydration. I've been using for.
Okay. You knew you had to get a certain amount of liquids in terms of hydration, and you were super conscious that it's slightly higher, but you also, after our discussion, Chad, learned that you can't just rely on water the whole time because that'll dilute your blood sodium. So you raise a really good point. That doesn't necessarily matter what, yes, I represent precision hydration, but doesn't really matter too much what brand you use. It's understanding what works for you is the key take home. That carbohydrate mix, we'll dive into that in a sec, what's in there. And then there's always a bit of sodium that they put in these 6% solution carb drinks, hypertonic it's called, whereas an electrolyte drink is hypotonic, really easy to absorb through the bloodstream. We know you took some additional sodium. You just did a little bit of the maths. Say you had 300 milligrams in serving of the Never Second, bearing in mind it was a stronger concentration. You were probably mixing, and then you diluted that with. Now, the hydration you actually had in terms of fluid separate, were you having electrolyte tabs, or were you just taking some salt pills like we chatted on the bike?
So maybe prior to the race, as I recommended by yourself, so I started 2 days in advance by actually taking the pH 1500. So I drank, especially it's super hot throughout the day, and you're walking throughout the Ironman village. So I took 2 bottles of pH 1500 with the tablets, starting 2 days in advance.
Yes.
On the race morning, also 1 bottle of 1500. And sometimes I face some cramps during the swim, which I absolutely didn't this time in Kona. And then on the bike itself, I've added sodium capsules from Precision. I did the electrolyte capsules. I've added those in my bottle, so I was taking 3 bottles with me, and I had some 3 or 4 additional capsules with me on the bike to actually take in when actually taking bottles from the aid stations.
You additionally took some sodium on top if you felt like
Yeah,
you might have needed it, probably on the way up to Harvey when
yeah,
it's a bit hotter. That's that sort of area of the sweat
yeah.
box, and then coming down into.
Yeah, and I must say, Andy, especially going back from Javi to Kona, because then really the heat kicks in, and literally start cooking under that helmet.
Yeah, yeah,
Plus also that was also the time by the time you return from Javi that your own bottles are empty, so you're sort of forced to take bottles from the aid stations, which was mortal hydration this time. So there is some sodium in, but not sufficient to have the necessary sodium intake. So that was the time I also took the capsules, which I carried with me.
no, that's perfect. I mean, that's improved since even 2 years ago. This post, I think that's from 2009. Yeah, but back in those days when I did it, seems so long ago, but I was only there 2 years ago. It's my most recent. They would just generally do Gatorade and high carb focus. There's a big
Yeah.
shift now that Precision have actually joined forces with Ironman. They use certainly the European races. They're using some Morton and then some Precision. So there's a recognition. It's not that everyone needs loads. Some people have a low sodium in their sweat. Some people higher. It's very genetic. So we'll touch a bit on that in a little bit. The carbohydrate concentration, I know I've looked at that brand, you won't know this probably offhand. Is this a maltodextrin or is it mainly glucose? So your fructose and sucrose, or is it maltodextrin is a glucose, which is what allows us to absorb up to 90 grams an hour, just for the listeners. You've pushed over 100. I know a lot of the athletes, the precision athletes especially, are trying up to 120 grams per hour. So science is at some stage one stage where you can get up to 90 grams absorption, oxidize it. The tour riders are using 120, etc. So there's two arguments that sit here. You clearly had no gut discomfort, no sitting, heavy, the carbs sitting in your stomach. You've trained the gut. You've done 6, 7, 8 Ironmans. You operate, yeah, you've operated quite a high level. You've been under sub-9 quite a few times. To go to sub-9 in Kona is very tricky as an age grouper. You're in the 30, 34, one of the most competitive, and the one after you. But you're a regular sub-9. So do you know more or less what the carb constitution of the Never Second is?
It's maltodextrin to fructose, so 2 to 1 maltodextrin to fructose.
There we go. So it's pretty much, just to give a little bit, I won't go too into detail. Most of the leading brands I've seen now are moving down maltodextrin and fructose for absorption. We know that we can get up to like 2 to 1 ratio, up to 90 grams very comfortably. That's where you get, and generally more the superior. So we use, dare we say, Morton. They use, that type of concentrate, Morton, maltodextrin, Precision do as well. A lot of the cheaper, really quick sugars, the high fives, it's just like sucrose and fructose, so table, pure sugars and tailwind. You just can't necessarily tolerate that. For some people can, and all. It doesn't matter about the brand, guys and girls. It's actually how you absorb it. So that's that. We know there's some sodium in there. We topped up some more. Correct me if I'm wrong. You never actually had a sweat test.
I had in January, February, in the beginning of the year. Yeah.
Okay, you did.
Was in Ghent, University of Ghent.
So you went to Ghent, yeah.
You're that's midwinter, so you're not used to heat or humidity at all. But eventually, that was sort of it was a good test, and I'm sort of an average sweater, so between 800 and 1,000 milligrams per hour.
So that's great. So to put that in context, average is literally around 950. You bang on in the middle, which is great. If you up into the 1,500 milligrams type of sodium losses that some people are, you just have to be very mindful. And then you get the outliers that are sort of 400, 500 milligrams, which is per liter of sweat, not per hour.
Yep.
Remember, it's all sweat rate times sweat sodium. Okay, so that's your carbs. Boom, you hit 110 to 120 easily, which sets you up for a nice marathon. So you obviously go through the 8 stations there. It's loads of ice. It's a cooling management.
Honestly, it's a cooling management, right? And honestly, Andy, what you see in I've done quite separate marathons. I've done marathons, of course, in Ironman races. But honestly, what you see in an Ironman at Kona during the marathon, it's just insane. I mean, you see people fainting, you see people walking, you see people vomiting. Battlefield. It's a battlefield. It's really a battlefield. And honestly, T2. So I felt quite okay coming from the bike. T2, you go direction alley drive. Yeah, and I knew before, because I was really afraid for the marathon, especially since I did 4 days prior to the race, 5 days prior to the race, a bike and a run of the bike in Energy Lab. And I started off really way too fast in Energy Lab, and it really hit me in the face. And I was like, fuck, this is only 8 or 9K, which I'm doing here in Energy Lab. I can't imagine doing a decent marathon here. So I was really, really afraid going into the marathon, which was honestly good. So really put both feet on the ground.
You respected it, and that's what people don't do.
Yeah, so I really respected it. And honestly, I started off with a pace 410, 415, which I honestly maintained. So every 8 station, I sort of walked through the 8 stations. I took ice. I had this half-liter bottle, so I started off in T2 with a half-liter bottle, and let's say as from kilometer 8, 9,
yeah,
empty, and I just refilled it with ice, with water, with mortar hydration. So I always had this fresh bottle of water with me. In one hand, on the other hand, some bananas or the Morton gels, which I got from the 8 stations. Honestly, I maintained that pace 410, 415 until Energy Lab. And I was suffering, but I felt somehow that I was suffering a bit less than the others, because also in the marathon, I was just overtaking athletes. And then, of course, Energy Lab, as Nathan learned from last Monday, go slowly. I go slowly into Energy Lab. Take ice before the way up, because it's especially since the turning point, you go up, that most people start to faint, to vomit, to walk. But I never had the idea of walking, even after an 8 station, even after kilometer 27, 28, when you actually are leaving Energy Lab. yeah, I just took the ice. I took the time to go through the aid station, took some bananas, took some Morton. And honestly, I suffered maybe most on the Queen K going back to Kona. You have this rolling parkour, and then you imagine at a certain moment you believe you're almost there, but there's still one way up to Palani Road, up to Palani Hill, and then you go to the right. That's where I maybe suffered most. But again, my pace maybe dropped there to 420, 425. Of course, because you stop at the aid stations, the average pace goes to 420, 422, I think the average pace was. But in all honesty, I was able, and quite surprisingly for myself, to maintain that pace quite well over the entire marathon. Yeah, and again, I'm suffering, everyone's suffering, but I felt throughout the entire marathon I was maybe just suffering a bit less. What also helped me, there were some other Belgian guys and who actually throughout the marathon shared with me what was my position. I came off the bike in 30th position. And of course, I felt that I was overtaking quite some athletes, but actually that was being confirmed by those Belgians who was telling me, yeah, you're position 20, position 18, position 16, position 15. And then I think I was at position 15, 14 at kilometer 38, 39. So literally climbing the hill to Palani Road. And still there, I got the energy for the final 3K. I think I did in less than 4 minutes per kilometer. So I still had somehow some energy to sprint to that finish line. So yeah, that's for me only the confirmation. I think my fueling strategy was quite okayish, and I really balanced well my efforts throughout the entire race.
That's such a good recap, and it's testament to your work you've put in, because great coaching as well. You are very consistent. I remember you came on a training camp last winter in Lanza with us, and that you started to do you did another Ironman, then you had the birth of your child. Yeah, you've trained through the summer now to travel all the way to the fueling was spot on. You, the fact that you didn't run out of energy highlights not only a really good strategy, but let's face it, you've got to have a very good metabolic flexibility, so that ability to pick up, and then you can only get that from very good training, to pick up your pace at the end, which means you didn't have gut distress. And that's where you reel in people. You summed it up from 35Ks onwards, and you end up 13th.
13th age group, and then 86th overall.
Yeah, so top 100 with 50 pros, is obviously just a male day, no females there. It's top notch for you. You're so young in the sport, which is great. So now you're having some recovery. You can't stop thinking about the next attack. I know Kona's in the next 2 years, but tell me about briefly just your thoughts of summer plans of racing, or maybe it's not confirmed yet.
So for sure, 1 or 2 full distances in 2025. And in all honesty, Andy, Kona really got me, so I just want to go back. I just want to go back.
Yeah, get that
So
top 10.
in an ideal scenario, I pick a race maybe towards the end of the summer, potentially for a qualification, or to qualify me for myself for 2026. That I get, because I really appreciate now that I knew like 1.5 year, 2 years in advance that I would be going to Kona. So from a preparation perspective, was just really, really ideal. So preferably or ideally, I qualify at the end of summer, looking at maybe Ironman Thun, which I think the first qualification race for 2026, and then maybe aiming top 10. Who knows?
Yes.
Let's see. So no, definitely not stopping with triathlon racing or Ironman racing. But indeed, for now, taking a bit time off, focusing a bit on the family, new job on the side. So, but for sure, returning back to Kona one day. Yes.
That's so good to hear. So anything you would change on race day? It sounds like everything is positive, but it's nice to hear that you are human, so you make mistakes.
I was okay with the bike, the run as well. I think I could. So I've been training really hard on the bike and the run. I should be focused maybe a bit more on the transitions, because I think there are still a couple of minutes which I can get that there. And on the swim, I got stung by a couple of jellyfish, which really got me out of my rhythm, especially halfway. You're past the boat. There was a combination of jellyfish there, but also the age group 50 to 70 started right before us. So it was literally halfway that we got into that big group of blue caps, and it was really overtaking left, right, and it really got me out of my rhythm in combination with the jellyfish. So maybe a couple of minutes can be taken there, but in all honesty, as you probably will confirm, Andy, you won't make the difference in the swim, especially in Kona. I mean, especially in Kona. But still, the really, really good athletes swim there 50, 55 minutes. So that's still 5 to 10 minutes. They come 5 to 10 minutes earlier out of the water than myself. So that's especially also for me time, which I need to compensate. So I think still some practice on the swim there. And then from a fueling strategy, maybe going up to 130, especially since I felt sort of that light hunger feeling towards the end of the bike split. I should be able to increase the carb intake to maybe 130, 135 per hour to maybe even start stronger at the bike split, the marathon split.
Okay, yeah. So the only two things I would say to that, one, the first thing being the fueling, what you could trial certainly in your next block of training, and of course for the next Ironman, is maybe to have a little bit of solids early on the bike while the heart rate's low and it's cool, because that satiation feeling I struggle with, a little bit of hunger. It's not that you didn't get enough fuel, but just to have something maybe soft to chew on, I really highly recommend that. And now you have the confidence to try that. That's the only thing I'd change there. I think everything else you nailed. Making sure you just had the right amount of fluid intake as well over that each hour, there's 4.5 hours. And then the other thing I'd comment on the swim, you regularly around like a 104 kind of swimmer, Ironman, somewhere around there, 1 to 1 hour with a wetsuit. So actually a 103 swim in Kona, where you do get traffic, I believe from hearing to everyone talk about the jellyfish.
Yeah,
Crazy. We never had it, and yeah, it's quite horrible. When you're in the water, you're very vulnerable. So actually, a
yeah,
103 swim, yeah, in your age group, yes, you're right, 56, 58, or even a 55. Obviously, you get outliers, but you've come from quite far with working on your swim, and you make up a lot of. The thing is, you'll be with stronger bikers, which means you can just hold even less power and hold power. So that's just work in progress. Last question around drinking stuff. I just wanted to ask, do you know roughly how much you took on the bike per hour? If you had like, it's hard to tell because you grab
uh,
bottles.
yeah.
750
I
is a
think,
bottle. Do you think you
yeah.
took around a liter an hour of
Yeah,
fluid? Or
even a bit more, because I often just took a bottle of water, which I drank, squeezed a bit in my face, my legs, and I just threw it away, still in the aid station. So yeah, yeah. So I think between 1.5 liter per hour
yeah.
average. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what seems to get a good performance. Most people undercook that,
yeah.
but that's awesome. That's covered everything, and I'll let you get on with the working day in your suit and tie there.
Thanks again for your time to advise me. Because, and honestly, I'm quite confident again on the carb intake, but I was absolutely not that confident on the sodium intake. And I think your advice and helping me to shape that fueling strategy, especially for Kona with, I think, extraordinary circumstances, really gave me that confidence boost.
Oh, very
Also
kind,
much
man.
appreciated. Thanks.
No, that's very kind. That's cool. Well, I'll speak to you soon, and we'll touch base. See you
Andy,
later.
man, ciao. Ciao. Bye bye. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.